I grew up in Swansea, in South Wales, and I did my GCSEs. I failed all of my GCSEs. My mum went crazy and made me resit the entire year, to which I then failed all my GCSEs all over again. But I was like, don't worry, Mum, I'm going to be a rock star. It's going to be awesome. It's just my plan. So I went to music college, got into a band. Band started doing well. We got signed to a singles deal, which went quite well. We put the single out. And then from there, we got scouted by the major labels. So I don't know if any of you guys are musicians in the music industry. Okay, so when a major label comes knocking at the door, it's a bit like a big football team. You don't really say no. You just get excited. So we went and did these showcases. We got signed to a major label, which at the time was called Parlophone Records. And we made a record in Rockfield Studios, big studio in Wales. And at the time, everyone told us that we were going to be massive. We had a manager, we had A&R. The A&R guy said, you are going to be the next U2. And I was like, oh, that's good, because that's kind of what I told my mum. So at that point, the record label did what a lot of record labels do. They signed a lot of artists, and then they shelved us, which means they basically waited and waited and waited and waited. And after a while, I was like, we're not doing anything. We've been signed, we've made a record, and we're not doing anything. So we kind of forced the label to kind of put the record out and said, look, you need to put it out. They agreed. And I think the only person that bought the record was my mum. It was very nice of her. And then we got dropped off the label. And that was the end, because we basically got brought in for a meeting we got a phone call, really. Had a meeting with our manager. Said, you've been dropped from the label. And I was like, okay, well, what do we do next? And they said, that's it. And we were like, okay, so what do we do next? And he was like, no one's going to buy another record. We put it out, nobody cared. You've been dropped off the label. So your two choices are, hey guys, your two choices are, number one, start a new band, or number two, get a job. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, I guess I'll get a job. So the drummer, who was a friend of mine, he said, I can get you a job. There's a job going where I work in the local shampoo factory. So I was like, oh yeah, all right, well, I'll go and work in a shampoo factory. And so what happened then was my job, I turned up the shampoo factory. My job was to stand at this conveyor belt, and there was a conveyor belt with four of us around it and someone on the end. And basically, someone would pick up a shampoo bottle and put it on the conveyor belt, and it would come down, and I'd have to pick it up and polish the top, and then put it back down again. And that was the whole job. That was it. So I was there for about 3 hours polishing shampoo bottles, and I was thinking, this is shit, and I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And I said to the drummer, this is awful, I don't get it, I think this is rubbish. And he said, oh, you get used to it. And I was like, how long have you been doing this? And he said, 7 years. So I was like, fuck that, I'm out. So I basically put the shampoo bottle down, I polished it first, and then I left, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's going to be in music, I'm going to do something else. So I went to a music college in Guildford, ended up working there, running that place, built it, called ACM in Guildford. I was there for 4 years before I left, set up another college in Brighton with a business partner called BIM, which kind of grew exponentially. My background has always been in helping musicians. That's kind of just been my career, is being a musician and helping musicians in music education. But a really interesting thing has happened over the last 5 to 10 years with sort of social media growing so much. And it's really changed what the music industry is now. It's given total control to the artist. So what's happened is, there used to be a case, back in the day when I got signed, in order to make a record, you'd have to go into a big studio, which would probably cost about 1,500 quid a day to go in the studio. You might be there for 3 months. So it might cost you 60, 70 grand to make an album. And then you have to do a music video, which at the time might cost 20 grand. You might have to then get all the music onto CDs, so they might have to print 50 to 100,000 copies in order to ship them all over the country, all over the world, so that back in the day, who remembers the time when you had to actually go and buy music? Remember when you had to actually literally get off your arse and go to town and then go to Woolworths and buy a CD? Weird. But so you'd have to actually have your physical product made. So it would cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. And as a musician, you couldn't do that. So you needed a record label to basically advance that, to fund it, to fund making the record and to make the physical product and to distribute it so it sells. Then you fast forward to today, and all of a sudden, none of that happens anymore, because you can make a record for free in your bedroom, which people do nowadays, or you can go into, local studios and still make sort of quality music, which you can then put out. Then, instead of actually needing to have a physical copy of something, a CD, it goes on, air, just goes in your phone. So all of a sudden, you are now, as a musician, completely in control of what it is you do. And so my job has always been helping musicians, how you can get from point A to point B, how you can say, I want to be this, an artist, a session player, a music teacher, and tour the world. That's been my job for the last 20 years. And now, with social media, with the emergence of social media, because the artists are completely in control, a new question has basically keeps coming to light. Every single day, musicians come to me on my Facebook and they say to me, we've got this EP coming out, or we've got an album coming out, or we've got a single coming out, and we're going to put it on Spotify and iTunes and SoundCloud. And straight away, I'm like, hang on, stop. If you're going to put it on iTunes and Spotify, you're giving two messages. You're saying to people, buy my music on iTunes, or have it for free on Spotify. So if you say to someone, do you want to buy this? And someone says, okay, how much? And you go, it's £1, or free. Or it's £10, or free. People go, free. I'll just take the free one. And that's the way it works. So musicians are struggling of where they're putting music, because they've got so many choices and the noise is all there. So the question I always get from musicians is, how do I monetize my music? Like, all of a sudden we live in a time where music is totally and utterly priceless. Like, if you remember, there's pieces of music and songs that have changed your life, like literally changed your life. I remember being 15 years old. I was in a pool hall and there was a massive big screen just like this, and I was playing pool, and MTV was playing back in the day when MTV played songs instead of programs about 16-year-old pregnant girls. And there was basically Metallica Enter Sandman came on, and I was 15, and it was like, I just remember thinking, fuck, like, there's just James Hetfield, the drums are kicking in, dum, 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 dum. And I'm like, fuck, this is amazing. And Hetfield's going, say your prayers, and I'm like, fuck, I want to do that for the rest of my life. I want to be James Hetfield, is what I want to be. It changed my life. Other pieces of music have changed my life, and you'll have the same thing. You'll have songs and bands that literally changed your life. So how much are those pieces of music worth to you? They are literally, you can't put a price on them. They've shaped your life. They're a soundtrack to your life. Therefore, they are priceless. But as a piece of music that you can't live without, how much would you pay for that music? Nothing. Literally nothing. Because why would you? My favourite piece of music is Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. Just think it's just an amazing piece of music. The guitar on it is incredible. I can't live without that piece of music. How much will I pay for it? Nothing. Nothing at all. Because it's on Spotify, or YouTube, or SoundCloud, or somewhere else. I can just literally get it to my phone instantly, and I can play it on every gadget in my house. I can literally walk into my front room and I can just go, Alexa, play Brothers in Arms, and she just goes, all right, Damo, and she plays it. That's it. So I don't need to pay for the music because it's just all around. So musicians are in this pickle because they can't make money from the music anymore very easily. So the question I get is, how am I going to monetize this? How do I monetize my tour? How do I make a record and actually make the money back? And I think it's the wrong question. I think the question should not be, how do you monetize the music? I think the question is, how do you build the audience using the music and then monetize the brand? That to me is the key. And that's where things like influencer marketing comes in. Because I work with loads of musicians. I know musicians and artists and bands that you know of, like really, really big level household names that work in shops. Like a couple of weeks back, I went to a steak house, and one of the guys serving me who was a sort of a semi-friend of mine. He's in a big signed band. Like, they've sold records. They are literally on tour at the moment in America. They tour the world, but then when he's not on tour, he comes back. He cannot make enough money to live off it, so then he gets a job, and his job is he's a waiter serving steak in a steakhouse. And so, for me, the influencer marketing side to it is where you build up the brand by giving away the content, in musicians' case, music, and then you look to monetize it. So for example, you might monetize it with merchandise, which musicians don't do well enough. You might monetize it with brands. I foresee a time, earlier on there was a talk about influencer marketing. Influencer marketing, which has been, for the last couple of years, it's been, if you post something featuring me, I'll give you a bit of money. Like a really simplistic form. And nowadays what's happening is, the influencer marketing thing is, people are realizing that one post is not enough. You need to work together in collaboration over a period of time. And what I foresee is something that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, is now musicians will still need the money to make a record, they'll still need the money to go on tour, but instead of going to a record label who then keeps the record and says, we'll pay for the record, but it's ours. I think what will happen instead is bands and artists will just go to brands. They'll just go to Red Bull and just say, look, we need £30,000 for this tour. But for it, you'll get access to our social media. We'll have a big backdrop, which will say the band name, sponsored by Red Bull. We'll have competitions and giveaways via the social media, via the website. All of a sudden, it becomes a viable product, because all of a sudden, Red Bull go, okay, how much reach and engagement am I going to get for my 30 grand? It's going to be worth it, for a certain size of bands. And the reason for that is because, as musicians, one thing that we can do better than almost anybody on the planet is we can trigger an emotion. Like, we can literally trigger them, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, whether it's fun, whether it's Radiohead and it's depression, it doesn't matter. But whatever it is, you can trigger that emotion, and that engages people. Like, it means that we follow bands via their social media. Some of them are better than others. Bands are traditionally terrible at social media, so they just bring other people in, which doesn't really work very well. But when a band nails it, when they get it right, what it means is they're taking you on their journey of what it is, and that's what we want. I want to see what, I love Biffy Clyro, so if I can see what Simon Neil is doing at the moment, I'm in. That's it, I'm sorted. I'm like, great. It doesn't matter whether it's Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, makes no difference. You tell me where Dave Grohl is, I'll watch it, because I think Dave Grohl's cool. And Dave Grohl is an influencer by his very trade, because when he does something, we all think he's great, and we buy into it. And so there needs to be this kind of collaboration between what's happened in many other aspects of the industries for a while. If you go watch sport on TV, even the adverts are sponsored by adverts. It's like, just everything's sponsored. But the music industry feels very colloquial, and we've all gone, no, it's not cool, you're not having it. But there's a new emergence of artists that are coming through that don't buy into that. They'll just say, I need to get my music out there, And if I need a brand, if I need a biscuit company to come on board with it, fuck it, I'm going to do that, because it gets my music out there, and it's becoming more and more socially acceptable to have some kind of brand recognition with it. And from a brand point of view, I think more and more brands are turning to music and turning to the actual band or the actual artist, simply because the engagement on a lot of bands, if they get it right on their social media, is so much better than most other sectors, most other industries. So the question for me of where this goes is how you build the audience, because if you build the audience as a band, you win. If you get to the point where you've got enough people around you who buy into your music, that you can look after them as a group, as a community, all of a sudden you can fund your record, you can fund your tour, you can fund your life. You can not have to work in a steak shop because your audience has come with you. And it's not the audience who's funding you anymore, it's everybody else. So with my audience, for example, I help musicians. I will never, ever, ever charge a musician for anything that I do. And every time a musician emails me, Facebooks me, Instagrams me, I'll do everything I can to message them back. And if I can sit down and have a cup of tea, if you're a musician and you message me and you're in Brighton, I'll be like, let's have a cup of tea. And if I can't, we'll have a Skype. And if I can't, we'll have an email. And if I can't, we'll have a Facebook chat. And we're working on your career and how we do it. And I will never, ever charge you for that. But will I charge a brand? Fucking right I will. Because if I can say, oh yeah, that's the music industry guy, sponsored by Red Bull, fuck it, I'll do that. Because I don't want to charge you, because musicians don't have any money, and they probably wouldn't pay for it anyway. But if I then get 50,000 people on board with me, saying, this guy knows what he's talking about, they believe in me and they believe in what I do, and I just go, yeah, and it says Red Bull by there, and there's me drinking a Red Bull, and I like Red Bull, why not? It makes complete sense. So this for me is all about how you build your audience. And the way you build your audience is you look after them like they've never been looked after in their life. So it used to be a case where you give, like from a music point of view, you'd have this 1 year turnaround or maybe 2 year turnaround of your music. You make a record, you go on tour, you promote it, it takes about a year. We're not in that time anymore. The music industry like that is gone. Now it's content. Whether it's music, whether it's vlogs, whether it's interviews, you're getting stuff out there in order to look after your audience on a day-to-day basis. And then when they comment, you're chatting to them and you're building the engagement, you're building the audience. If you can do that, it builds pretty quick. And in doing that, you'll get these kind of super fans that'll stay with you for a long period of time. And then from there, what you're doing is you're looking at brands. And the last thing I'd say is, if you're in a band and you're looking for a brand, or you're looking for some kind of help, you know, when the guys earlier, when they're talking about Kylie Jenner, brilliant, yeah, fantastic, yeah. She just almost took down Snapchat with one tweet. Fantastic. But if you go to your town and you go to Dave's Fish and Chip Shop, Dave's Fish and Chip Shop still needs some kind of reach. And so there's still collaborations to be done, whether it's Dave's Fish and Chip Shop or the local bike shop. They still need some kind of collaboration for putting on events, for doing social media. And in the last 12 months of doing this, when I'm getting bands to go and find local sponsors and actually doing kind of influencer marketing on a local level where both teams meet and both teams win, all of a sudden you can fund what you do, because going on tour is hard. I don't know if any of you guys have been on tours. It's really difficult to go on tour because venues are getting more expensive to actually hire out. Not many people are going to gigs, so it's just difficult. It's a tough time. But if you get some backing, some sponsorship, it makes it a lot easier. So that's it really. The music industry is a very, very different place. I'm very, very bored of hearing people say the new music industry and then harp on about the old music industry. Now, you are completely in control. 100%, because you have direct access to the audience. So if you can build up the audience and look after your audience like they've never been looked after, and then look for brand partnerships on the same level as yourself, you can now sustain a career in music without having to get a job in a steak shop.